Hello, I'm Sharon Howe, a translator from German to English, and I'm going to be reading from my translation of an extract from Hitler's Interviews, The Dictator and the Journalists by Lutz Hachmeister. The author, who sadly died this summer, is famous internationally as the director of the 2005 film The Goebbels Experiment, co-produced by the BBC and starring Kenneth Branagh. In this book, which is due for publication in November 24, he delves into over 100 interviews Hitler gave to foreign journalists, particularly from the English-speaking press, throughout his political career. What I find interesting about it is the way he draws parallels with the autocrats of today and their use of social media, trolls and fake news. It really couldn't be more timely. As time is short, I'll summarise in between quoting from the text to give a bit more of an overview. The book begins by describing how Hitler talked himself to power. He was actually a bad speaker, unlike the much more accomplished Goebbels. He screeches, his mannerisms are awkward, he never knows when to stop. But he didn't like being questioned by journalists. He was suspicious of the media, believing it to be controlled by a global Jewish conspiracy. In the end, though, he was persuaded by his advisors and came to see the propaganda and value of interviews and even began to charge a fee. For journalists, securing an interview was a trophy that guaranteed instant headlines. As soon as the Nazis began to be credited with a realistic chance of power in Germany, a constant stream of foreign journalists came knocking at Hitler's door. Most were ill-prepared, so that Hitler was able to call the shots. Here, Hachmeister draws a comparison with today, citing the debate around useful idiots in the established media, which consciously or unconsciously reinforce politically extreme attitudes by offering political bullies a platform, particularly since the electoral success of ideologically right-wing parties throughout Europe. We can think here of the Le Pen clan in France, the Austrian Freedom Party leader Jörg Haider, Berlusconi and Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and of course the AfD in Germany. Hachmeister writes, Hitler's media biography falls within a period of radical upheaval that saw the birth and spread of cinema, radio, illustrated magazine culture, political posters and neon advertisements. Even more significant, however, was the growing interconnection from the 19th century onwards between advertising, PR, early forms of political marketing, group psychology and propaganda. And here he quotes, again very topically, from Gustav Le Bon's 1895 book on crowd psychology. The masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduce them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim. Among the many more contemporary voices quoted in the book is the American writer T.C. Boyle, who sees uncanny parallels between Donald Trump and Hitler, since Trump also uses fake news, propaganda and hatred of minorities to manipulate people to the point that they even end up voting against their own interests. Hachmeister warns against a too ready recourse to Weimar Reloaded analogies, however. It is true that during his first US presidency, Trump was already in an even better position than the Nazi dictator, thanks to social media, to shun legacy media such as CNN, the New York Times or the Washington Post, while pouring vitriol on the already threatened journalists of these elite publishing institutions. But here too the differences are clear. Trump is a rich kid, an obscure real estate investor, a reality TV show host with no enthusiasm for international military interventions. Hitler was, in biographical terms alone, none of these things. Nevertheless, T.C. Boyle's points about strategic communication, about defining the enemy, and about political marketing through stereotyping and oversimplification are undoubtedly correct. Almost all dictators, autocrats, sect and religious leaders throughout history have achieved their rise and rule by means of communication control regimes, historical revisionism, bread and circuses, and a more or less sophisticated psychological study of their actual and potential followers. And they have done so using the media tools of the time, be they commemorations, gestures, slogans, marches or demonstrations. Hitler's interviews were likewise part of such an overarching strategy, making use of the formats of modern journalism. In the rest of the book, Hachmeister goes on to examine the interviews in more detail and concludes with a wider assessment of this dynamic between the media and autocratic leaders, particularly in the context of the current upsurge in popularism. Thank you for listening.